The discovery. The sky was a vast, unbroken expanse of blue, stretching endlessly in every direction. Captain Elias Vance adjusted the controls of his sleek, silver jet, the Etherwing, as he soared through the stratosphere. He was on a routine reconnaissance mission, tasked with gathering atmospheric data for a research project. But today, the sky held a secret, one that would change his life forever. As he ascended higher, the air grew thinner, and the clouds below formed a dense, cottony blanket. The instruments on his dashboard flickered, and for a moment, Elias thought he was experiencing a malfunction. But then, through the haze, he saw it, a shimmering golden light piercing through the clouds. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The light seemed to pulse, as if alive, and it drew him in like a moth to a flame. Against his better judgment, Elias steered the Etherwing toward the light. As he approached, the clouds parted, revealing a sight that took his breath away. Floating above the clouds was a city, a magnificent, sprawling metropolis of gleaming spires and crystalline domes. It was a city in the clouds, hidden from the world below. The structures seemed to defy gravity, suspended in the air as if by magic. Elias's heart raced as he realized he had stumbled upon something extraordinary, something that should not exist. He circled the city, his mind racing with questions. Who built this place? How had it remained hidden for so long? And most importantly, what or who lived here? As he descended closer, he noticed that the city was eerily quiet. There were no signs of life, no movement in the streets. It was as if the city had been frozen in time. Elias found a place to land his jet on a wide, flat platform that seemed to be designed for that purpose. As he stepped out of the cockpit, the air felt different, charged with energy, as if the very atmosphere was alive. He took a cautious step forward, his boots clicking against the smooth, metallic surface. The city was even more breathtaking up close. The buildings were adorned with intricate carvings and glowing runes, and the streets were paved with a material that shimmered like liquid gold. But as Elias ventured deeper into the city, he began to feel a sense of unease. The silence was oppressive, and the air grew colder with each step. He reached out to touch one of the glowing runes, and as his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, visions of a time long past, when beings of immense power walked the earth. They were not gods, but something else entirely. They had ruled the world with wisdom and strength, but their reign had come to an end. They had been betrayed, imprisoned in this city, hidden away from the world they once ruled. Elias stumbled back, his mind reeling from the visions. He realized that this city was not a home for gods. It was a prison, and he had just awakened something that had been dormant for millennia. As he stood there, trying to make sense of what he had seen, a voice echoed through the empty streets. It was deep and resonant, filled with both power and sorrow. "You have come at last, Elias Vance. We have been waiting for you." Elias turned, his heart pounding in his chest. Standing before him was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. It was tall and radiant, with eyes that glowed like stars. But there was something in its gaze, a sadness that spoke of centuries of imprisonment. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice trembling. The figure smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We are the Forgotten Ones," it said, "and you, Elias, are one of us." Before Elias could respond, the ground beneath him began to shake, and the city came alive with a deafening roar. The Forgotten Ones were awakening, and they had been waiting for him. The awakening. The ground beneath Elias's feet trembled violently, and the once silent city erupted into chaos. The air was filled with a cacophony of sounds, roaring winds, the clanging of metal, and the distant cries of beings long imprisoned. The golden light that had drawn him to the city now pulsed with an intensity that was almost blinding. Elias shielded his eyes, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend what was happening. The radiant figure before him extended a hand, its voice cutting through the noise. "Elias Vance, you must come with me. There is little time." Elias hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to flee. But something deep within him, A strange, inexplicable pull compelled him to stay. He took the figure's hand, and in an instant, the world around him blurred. The city dissolved into a whirlwind of light and sound, and when his vision cleared, he found himself standing in a vast, circular chamber. The chamber was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls were made of a translucent material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid, and the ceiling was so high that it disappeared into darkness. In the center of the room stood a massive, crystalline structure, pulsing with the same golden light that had drawn him to the city. Surrounding the structure were more of the radiant beings, their eyes fixed on him with a mixture of hope and desperation. "Where am I?" Elias demanded, his voice echoing in the vast space. "You are in the heart of the city," the figure replied. "This is the nexus, the source of our power and our prison." Elias's mind raced as he tried to piece together what was happening. "You said I'm one of you. What does that mean?" The figure's gaze softened, and for the first time, Elias saw a flicker of warmth in its eyes. "Long ago, we ruled the earth. We were not gods, but beings of great power and wisdom. We guided humanity, protected them, and helped them flourish. But our power was also our downfall. There were those among us who grew arrogant, who sought to dominate rather than guide. A great war broke out, and in the end, we were betrayed by our own kind. The victors imprisoned us here, in this city, hidden from the world we once ruled." Elias shook his head, struggling to process the enormity of what he was hearing. "But why me? I'm just a pilot. I'm not one of you." The figure stepped closer, its presence overwhelming. "You are more than you know, Elias. Your true nature has been hidden from you, buried deep within your soul. But the time has come for you to remember. You are one of the forgotten ones, and your return is the key to our freedom." Before Elias could respond, the ground shook again, and the chamber was filled with a deafening roar. The crystalline structure in the center of the room began to crack, and the golden light spilled out, flooding the chamber with its radiance. The forgotten ones turned their gaze to the structure, their expressions filled with both fear and hope. "It is happening," the figure said, its voice trembling with emotion. "The prison is breaking. The time of our release is at hand." Elias felt a surge of energy course through him, and suddenly memories began to flood his mind. Memories that were not his own. He saw himself standing among the forgotten ones, wielding power beyond imagination. He saw the great war, the betrayal, and the moment he was cast into the world below, his memories erased, his true nature hidden. As the memories overwhelmed him, Elias fell to his knees, his body trembling with the weight of what he had lost, and what he had now regained. He looked up at the figure, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. The figure placed a hand on his shoulder, its touch both comforting and electrifying. "You must help us break the final seal. Only you have the power to do so. But be warned, the ones who imprisoned us will not give up their hold easily. They will come for you, and they will stop at nothing to keep us trapped." Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain: he could not turn away. The fate of the forgotten ones, and perhaps the world itself, rested in his hands. As he rose to his feet, the chamber was filled with a blinding light, and the crystalline structure shattered, releasing a wave of energy that swept through the city. The forgotten ones let out a collective cry, their voices filled with both joy and sorrow. The prison was breaking, and the time of their release was at hand. But as the light faded, Elias saw something that filled him with dread. Emerging from the shadows were figures clad in dark, armored robes, their eyes glowing with a malevolent light. They were the ones who had imprisoned the forgotten ones, and they had come to ensure that their prisoners remained trapped. The figure beside Elias turned to him, its expression grim. "The battle is not over, Elias. It has only just begun." Elias clenched his fists, feeling the power within him surge. He was no longer just a pilot, he was one of the forgotten ones, and he would fight for their freedom. "The battle begins." The dark-clad figures advanced, their movements swift and deliberate. Each step they took seemed to resonate with a sinister energy, and the air around them crackled with power. Elias stood his ground, his heart pounding as he prepared for the inevitable clash. The Forgotten Ones around him shifted into defensive positions, their radiant forms glowing brighter as they summoned their own powers. The leader of the dark figures stepped forward, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You should not have come here, Elias Vance. This city is not your place. The Forgotten Ones will remain imprisoned, and you will join them in their eternal suffering." Elias felt a surge of anger rise within him. "I don't know who you are, but I won't let you keep them trapped any longer. They deserve their freedom." The dark figure laughed, a sound that sent chills down Elias's spine. Freedom? They were imprisoned for a reason. Their power is too great, too dangerous. The world cannot handle their return. Before Elias could respond, the dark figure raised his hand, and a bolt of dark energy shot toward him. Elias reacted instinctively, raising his own hand to deflect the attack. To his astonishment, a shield of golden light formed in front of him, absorbing the dark energy and dissipating it harmlessly. The Forgotten Ones around him let out a collective cheer, their hope renewed by his display of power. The radiant figure who had guided him earlier stepped forward, its voice filled with urgency. "Elias, you must focus. Your powers are awakening, but they are still raw. You must learn to control them, or you will be overwhelmed." Elias nodded, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of the newfound abilities surging through him. He could feel the energy within him, a vast reservoir of power that he had never known existed. But it was wild, untamed, and he knew that if he didn't learn to control it, it could consume him. The dark figures launched another attack, this time with a coordinated assault that sent waves of dark energy crashing toward the Forgotten Ones. Elias and the radiant beings fought back, their combined powers creating a dazzling display of light and energy. The chamber was filled with the sounds of battle, the clash of powers, the cries of combatants, and the roar of the breaking prison. As the battle raged on, Elias began to feel more confident in his abilities. He could feel the power within him responding to his will, shaping itself into weapons and shields as he needed them. He deflected another attack, then launched a counterattack, sending a beam of golden light toward the dark figures. The beam struck one of them, and the figure let out a scream as it was consumed by the light. But the victory was short-lived. More dark figures emerged from the shadows, their numbers seemingly endless. Elias realized that they were fighting a losing battle. They were outnumbered, and the dark figures were relentless. The radiant figure beside him placed a hand on his shoulder, its voice filled with urgency. "Elias, you must go to the Nexus. It is the key to breaking the final seal. If you can reach it, you can free us all." Elias hesitated, torn between staying to fight and fulfilling his mission. "But what about you? I can't just leave you here." The figure smiled, a sad but determined expression on its face. "We will hold them off as long as we can, but you must go. The fate of the Forgotten Ones and the world depends on you." Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. He turned and ran toward the center of the chamber, where the shattered remains of the crystalline structure still pulsed with golden light. The dark figures tried to stop him, but the Forgotten Ones rallied, creating a barrier of light that held them back. As Elias reached the Nexus, he felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The power within him resonated with the Nexus, and he knew that this was the moment of truth. He placed his hands on the structure, and the world around him dissolved into a sea of light. Visions flooded his mind, visions of the past, of the Great War, of the betrayal that had led to the imprisonment of the Forgotten Ones. He saw himself standing among them, wielding power beyond imagination. And he saw the moment he was cast into the world below, his memories erased, his true nature hidden. As the visions overwhelmed him, Elias felt a deep connection to the Forgotten Ones. He understood now why he had been drawn to the city, why he had been chosen to free them. He was one of them, and he had a duty to fulfill. With a final surge of power, Elias channeled all of his energy into the nexus. The structure began to glow brighter and brighter until it was impossible to look at directly. Then, with a deafening roar, the nexus shattered, releasing a wave of energy that swept through the city. The dark figures were thrown back, their forms disintegrating as the wave of energy consumed them. The Forgotten Ones let out a collective cry of triumph, their radiant forms glowing brighter than ever. But as the light faded, Elias realized that the battle was not over. The dark figures were gone, but the city itself was beginning to collapse. The prison was breaking, and with it, the city that had housed it for so long. The radiant figure appeared beside him, its voice filled with urgency. "Elias, we must leave. The city is falling, and we cannot stay here." Elias nodded, his mind racing as he tried to figure out how to escape. The other wing was still on the landing platform, but it was too far away. The city was crumbling around them, and time was running out. The figure placed a hand on his shoulder, its touch calming his racing thoughts. "Do not fear, Elias. We will guide you." With that, the Forgotten Ones surrounded him, their radiant forms creating a protective barrier. The world around them blurred, and in an instant they were standing on the landing platform, the other wing waiting for them. Elias climbed into the cockpit, his hands trembling as he started the engines. The Forgotten Ones followed, their forms shifting and changing as they entered the jet. As the other wing lifted off, Elias looked back at the city, now collapsing into the clouds. The radiant figure appeared beside him, its voice filled with a mixture of sorrow and hope. "We are free, Elias, but our journey is far from over. The world below is not ready for our return, and there are those who will seek to destroy us. We must prepare for the battles to come." Elias nodded, his mind filled with a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a pilot, he was one of the Forgotten Ones, and he had a duty to protect them and the world they once ruled. As the other wing soared through the sky, Elias felt a strange sense of peace. The city in the clouds was gone, but the Forgotten Ones were free, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world below. The other wing descended through the clouds, leaving behind the crumbling city and the remnants of the prison that had held the Forgotten Ones for millennia. Elias's hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The revelations of the past hours had upended everything he thought he knew about himself and the world. He was no longer just a pilot. He was one of the Forgotten Ones, a being of immense power and ancient lineage. And now, he was responsible for guiding his kind back into a world that had long forgotten them. The radiant figure, who had introduced itself as Elian, sat beside him in the cockpit. Its form had shifted into something more humanoid, though it still glowed with an otherworldly light. Elian's voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of urgency. "Elias, the world below is not as we left it. Humanity has grown and changed in our absence. They may not understand who we are or what we represent. We must tread carefully." Elias nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon as the first glimpses of the earth came into view. "I know, but we can't hide forever. If we're going to survive, we need to find a way to coexist with humanity. They deserve to know the truth." Elian's expression was unreadable, but Elias sensed a flicker of doubt. "The truth is a dangerous thing, Elias. It has the power to unite or destroy. We must choose our path wisely." As the other wing descended further, Elias began to recognize the landscape below. They were approaching a remote region of the Himalayas, a place where the Forgotten Ones could regroup without drawing immediate attention. The jet touched down on a hidden plateau, surrounded by towering peaks and dense forests. The Forgotten Ones emerged from the aircraft, their radiant forms casting an ethereal glow over the rugged terrain. Elias stepped out of the cockpit, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. The weight of his new reality pressed down on him, but he pushed the doubts aside. He had a mission now, and he couldn't afford to falter. Elian approached him, its voice low. "We must establish a sanctuary here, a place where we can gather our strength and plan our next move. But we cannot do it alone. There are others like you, Elias. forgotten ones who were cast into the world below, their memories erased. We must find them and awaken them to their true nature. Elias frowned. How do we find them? If they're like me, they don't even know who they are. Elian placed a hand on his shoulder, its touch warm and reassuring. You will feel their presence, just as you felt the call of the city in the clouds. The power within you will guide you to them. But be warned, the ones who imprisoned us will also be searching for them. We must reach them first. Elias nodded, his resolve hardening. Then we don't have any time to waste. Where do we start? Elian closed its eyes, as if listening to something only it could hear. After a moment, it spoke. There is one not far from here, a young woman in a nearby village. She does not yet know what she is, but her power is beginning to awaken. We must go to her before it is too late. The journey to the village was arduous, but Elias and Elian moved with purpose. The Forgotten Ones remained behind to establish the sanctuary, their radiant forms blending seamlessly with the natural beauty of the mountains. As they approached the village, Elias felt a strange pull, a sensation that grew stronger with each step. It was as if an invisible thread was drawing him toward the young woman Elian had spoken of. The village was small and isolated, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering peaks. The people here lived simple lives, untouched by the modern world. Elias and Elian moved through the village cautiously, their presence drawing curious glances but no alarm. They found the young woman near the edge of the village, tending to a small garden. She was no older than 20, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold a hidden depth. Elian stepped forward, its voice gentle. Child, we mean you no harm. We are here to help you. The young woman looked up, her expression wary but not fearful. Who are you? What do you want with me? Elias stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. My name is Elias, and you're not who you think you are. You're one of us, one of the Forgotten Ones. Her eyes widened and she took a step back. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, just leave me alone. Elian raised a hand, and a soft, golden light enveloped the young woman. She gasped as the light touched her, her body trembling as memories long buried began to surface. Elias watched as her expression shifted from fear to confusion, and finally to understanding. My name is Lyra, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. I remember now. I remember everything. Elias felt a surge of relief. They had found one of their own. But as he turned to Elian, he saw a flicker of concern in the being's eyes. We must move quickly, Elian said. The ones who imprisoned us will have felt her awakening. They will come for her and for us. Elias nodded, his mind racing. Then we need to get her to the sanctuary. We can protect her there. But as they turned to leave, a shadow fell over the village. The air grew cold, and a sense of dread washed over them. Elias looked up and saw dark figures descending from the sky, their forms cloaked in shadow. The ones who had imprisoned the Forgotten Ones had found them. Elian's voice was filled with urgency. Elias, take Lyra and go. I will hold them off. Elias hesitated, torn between staying to fight and protecting Lyra. But he knew there was no time to argue. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the mountains, their only hope of escape. As they ran, Elias glanced back and saw Elian standing tall, its radiant form glowing brighter than ever. The dark figures descended upon it, and the air was filled with the clash of powers. Elias felt a pang of guilt, but he pushed it aside. He had to protect Lyra. He had to fulfill his mission. The journey back to the sanctuary was a blur. Elias and Lyra moved as quickly as they could, their progress slowed by the rugged terrain. But as they approached the plateau, Elias felt a surge of hope. The Forgotten Ones had already begun to transform the area, their powers shaping the land into a fortress of light and energy. As they reached the sanctuary, Elias turned to Lyra. You're safe now. We'll protect you. But Lyra's expression was filled with determination. I don't want to be protected. I want to fight. I want to help free the others. Elias nodded, a sense of pride swelling within him. They were not just survivors, they were warriors. and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the sun set over the mountains, Elias stood at the edge of the sanctuary, looking out over the world below. The battle was far from over, but he knew one thing for certain. The Forgotten Ones would not be prisoners again. They would fight for their freedom and for the future of the world. The final revelation. The sanctuary in the mountains had become a beacon of hope for the Forgotten Ones. Under Elias's leadership, they had begun to awaken others like Lyra, scattered across the world, unaware of their true nature. Each new addition to their ranks brought renewed strength and determination. But with every awakening, the dark figures, the Wardens as Elian called them, grew more relentless in their pursuit. The battle for freedom was far from over, and Elias knew that the final confrontation was drawing near. One evening, as the sun dipped below the peaks, Elias stood at the edge of the sanctuary, gazing out at the horizon. The air was thick with tension, and he could feel the weight of his responsibilities pressing down on him. Elian approached, its radiant form casting a soft glow in the twilight. "You carry much on your shoulders, Elias," Elian said, its voice gentle but firm. "But you are not alone. We are with you, and together we will see this through." Elias nodded, though his mind was still troubled. "I just can't shake the feeling that there's something we're missing. The Wardens are powerful, but they're not invincible. There has to be a way to defeat them permanently." Elian's expression grew solemn. "There is a way, but it comes at a great cost. The Wardens are bound to the Nexus, the same source of power that once sustained us. If the Nexus is destroyed, their power will be broken. But it will also sever our connection to the source of our strength. We will be free, but we will no longer be what we once were." Elias turned to face Elian, his eyes narrowing. "What are you saying? That we'll lose our powers?" Elian nodded. "Yes, we will become mortal, no different from the humans we once guided. But it is the only way to ensure that the Wardens can never imprison us again." Elias fell silent, his mind racing. The idea of losing the power that had defined him, that had defined all of them, was daunting. But he knew that true freedom often came at a price. And if it meant protecting the world from the Warden's tyranny, it was a price he was willing to pay. "Then we do it," Elias said, his voice steady. "We destroy the Nexus." Elian placed a hand on his shoulder, its touch filled with both pride and sorrow. "You have grown into the leader we always knew you could be, Elias. But know this, the path ahead will not be easy. The Wardens will stop at nothing to protect the Nexus. And even if we succeed, the world will never be the same." Elias met Elian's gaze, his resolve unshaken. "We don't have a choice. This is the only way." The plan was set in motion. The Forgotten Ones gathered in the heart of the sanctuary, their radiant forms glowing with determination. Elias stood at the center, flanked by Elian and Lyra. Around them, the others prepared for the final battle, their powers surging as they readied themselves for what lay ahead. Elian raised its hands, and a portal of golden light opened before them. Beyond it lay the ruins of the city in the clouds, now a shattered remnant of its former glory. The Nexus, though damaged, still pulsed with a faint, ominous light. It was there that the final confrontation would take place. "Stay close," Elias said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "We move as one." The Forgotten Ones stepped through the portal, emerging in the heart of the ruined city. The air was thick with the remnants of the Warden's dark energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. In the distance, the Nexus loomed, its fractured surface glowing with a malevolent light. As they approached, the Wardens emerged from the shadows, their forms cloaked in darkness. Their leader stepped forward, its voice a chilling echo. "You are fools to return here. The Nexus is ours, and you will never destroy it." Elias stepped forward, his voice ringing with defiance. "This ends now. We will not be prisoners again." The battle began with a deafening roar. The Forgotten Ones unleashed their powers, their radiant forms clashing with the dark energy of the Wardens. Elias fought with everything he had, his golden light cutting through the shadows. Lyra was beside him, her newfound powers blazing with intensity. Elian stood at the forefront, its strength holding the line against the Warden's onslaught. But the Wardens were relentless. Their numbers seemed endless, and their power was overwhelming. Elias realized that they couldn't win through strength alone. They needed to reach the Nexus. Elian, Elias shouted over the chaos. "We need to get to the Nexus." Elian nodded, its form glowing brighter as it summoned a barrier of light to hold back the Wardens. "Go! We will hold them off." Elias and Lyra broke through the line, sprinting toward the Nexus. The Wardens tried to stop them, but the Forgotten Ones rallied, their combined powers creating a path for Elias and Lyra to reach their goal. As they approached the Nexus, Elias felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. The power within him resonated with the Nexus, and he knew that this was the moment of truth. He placed his hands on the fractured surface, and the world around him dissolved into a sea of light. Visions flooded his mind, visions of the past, of the Great War, of the betrayal that had led to the imprisonment of the Forgotten Ones. He saw himself standing among them, wielding power beyond imagination. And he saw the moment he was cast into the world below, his memories erased, his true nature hidden. But there was something else, a final revelation that shook him to his core. The Nexus was not just a source of power. It was a prison for the Wardens as well. They had been trapped there, bound to its energy, just as the Forgotten Ones had been. Destroying the Nexus would free them all, but it would also unleash the Wardens upon the world. Elias's mind raced as he tried to make sense of what he had seen. There had to be another way. He couldn't destroy the Nexus without dooming the world to the Warden's tyranny. But if he didn't, the Forgotten Ones would never be free. As the visions faded, Elias turned to Lyra, his voice filled with urgency. "There's another way. We don't have to destroy the Nexus. We can use it to imprison the Wardens, permanently." Lyra's eyes widened. "How?" Elias placed his hands on the Nexus again, channeling all of his power into it. "We rewrite the Nexus. We make it a prison for them, just as it was for us." Lyra nodded, her expression filled with determination. She placed her hands on the Nexus as well, her power joining his. Together, they poured their energy into the structure, reshaping its purpose. The Wardens let out a collective scream as they felt the change. Their forms began to dissolve, pulled into the Nexus as it transformed into a prison once more. The Forgotten Ones watched in awe as the Wardens were consumed, their dark energy absorbed by the Nexus. When it was over, the Nexus glowed with a pure, golden light. The Wardens were gone, and the Forgotten Ones were free. Elias stood before the Nexus, his body trembling with exhaustion. The power within him was fading, and he knew that the Forgotten Ones would soon become mortal. But he also knew that they had achieved something greater than freedom. They had protected the world from the Warden's tyranny. Elian approached, its form dimming as the Nexus's power waned. "You have done what no one else could, Elias. You have given us a future." Elias smiled, though his heart was heavy. "It's not the future we imagined, but it's ours, and we'll make the most of it." As the sun rose over the ruins of the city in the clouds, the Forgotten Ones stood together, their radiant forms fading into the light of a new dawn. They were no longer gods or prisoners. They were simply beings, ready to face the world as it was. And Elias, once a pilot, now a leader, knew that their journey was just beginning.